To the Point with Michael Williams.
The case of a multi-billionaire NFL team owner accused of paying for sexual services at a Jupiter spa continues making headlines, at the same time putting an even bigger spotlight on human trafficking in our area. Good morning and welcome. Law enforcement officials say some of the spas in Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast are part of large-scale human trafficking rings with ties to China. The most prominent person charged is New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. His lawyers deny he engaged in any illegal activity. But as these cases, which have made headlines for weeks now, make their way through the court system, more attention will be paid to the subject of human trafficking. Joining me to talk about that and more, Tanya Meade with the Human Trafficking Coalition of the Palm Beaches. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me, Mike.
On this most vital topic, put it in perspective, the scope of this issue. As it broke here, there were people in the community who said, we've heard about this before. There were many more who saying, what, happening in places like Jupiter, happening on the Treasure Coast? Give us a sense of the scope and depth of the problem in our community.
Well, people still have a hard time believing that happens in this country, much less in our state, much less in our own backyard in Palm Beach County. And it surprises people to find out that Florida is ranked third in the nation for reported call volume to the human trafficking hotline. So, you know, we imagine it happens in big metropolitan cities, but not in our own backyard. So it's very disconcerting. And if you think about it, it happened at a strip mall. That's a place where we all go, right? We do our grocery shopping, we go out to dinner, we run our errands. And to think that something like this could happen where, you know, we travel on a daily basis is, you know, it's shocking.
In this case, women being impressed and to service in this human trafficking ring, prostitution, as Sheriff Snyder said, quote, I don't believe they were told they were going to work in massage parlors 7 days a week, having unprotected sex with up to 1,000 men a year. That was Sheriff William Snyder when the case broke last month.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if a trafficker was to tell someone this is what you were going to do, no one would sign up for that. Right? So part of the whole dynamic of human trafficking is there's this element of fraud, right? So they're offered something, they're offered a false promise of a better life, what have you, a different type of job. So they're lured here under the pretense of doing one thing, and then when they get here, it's actually something else.
Talk more about that victim profile.
So traffickers prey on people that have vulnerabilities, and we all have vulnerabilities, right? So whatever it is that that person needs, that potential victim needs or wants, that's what the trafficker is going to promise. So in many cases, for people that may lack a certain level of education or socioeconomic status, may be in need of, you know, extra money, that's what they're going to promise. You know, we'll promise you that you'll get this fantastic job. We'll promise you, again, whatever it is.
Come to the United States,
yes,
come to Palm Beach County.
Exactly, exactly. And
or
then when they get here, when they get here, it's totally something different. But I do want to state that trafficking at its essence is really the exploitation of a vulnerability. So a trafficker is someone that's going to take advantage of someone else's vulnerability for their own profit and their own gain. And while this particular case has people here, women brought here from other countries, I don't want to leave without saying that the majority of trafficking victims in this country are our own citizens. And it can happen to anyone.
Let's talk about both parts of that. We've talked about ties here to China. We've certainly heard about people being pressed into these human trafficking rings from Central and South America as well. You see the network that wide, but also that close to home. Talk about both aspects of that more in depth.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you can't, these illicit massage businesses, they're connected, it's international. There are people obviously brought here from other countries, and it takes a large ring, a large organized crime ring to be able to make that happen. But trafficking, again, at its essence, is the exploitation of a vulnerability. So while in this case, in cases like this, there are these huge rings, but it doesn't always look like that.
But talk more about the victims who do not come from out of the country, because I think for some people that's even more of an eye-opener to a story that could hardly be more sordid, and yet that aspect of it is not something a lot of people think about.
This is true. In fact, if you go to the Polaris Project, their website, which they operate, the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the statistics are that the majority of trafficking victims in this country are our own citizens. And you know, a significant percentage of those are our minors, you know, our young people. And so the biggest thing, I think, the most important thing that I think is to understand that really this can happen to anyone, anywhere, and we all have to be aware. And that's why it's super important that all of us as citizens need to understand how trafficking works, what to look for, what the indicators are, and how to make a report if and when we should ever see something that makes us go,
Well, let's talk about that, because in the case in Jupiter, for instance, and on the Treasure Coast, we would talk to people as part of our coverage that said something seemed odd. People coming in and out. I believe one interview said saw people with suitcases in and out of these places. It just seemed strange. So to the statement you just made, take us through that. What we all need to be aware of, which is first and foremost, it is happening in our community, including upscale communities where people say, well, it couldn't happen here. But tell us what other things we need to look for and how we proactively need to help fight this as citizens.
All right, well, for instance, in the case of these massage businesses, you know, obviously if there's people, a lot of people coming in and out, the suitcases, if there are indicators where people might be living, you know, on the same premises where they're working, that would be a red flag. In the case, again, of these massage businesses, if there are cameras, sometimes there'll be cameras, you'll see cameras on the outside by the front door is locked. If you have a legitimate business, you want people to come in to your establishment, right? You're not gonna lock the front door, you know, keeping people out. You want people to be able to come in. And at the Coalition, our main focus is education and awareness, because we can't prevent and we can't effectively combat something that we don't understand. So we work really hard at letting people know what to look for, and then once they see something, how to make a report.
What other keys should they look for?
Well, you could look for people that if someone doesn't understand where they are. And in this particular case, these women didn't speak any English. Well, in Palm Beach County, think about it, we have a melting pot here, so that in and of itself. But if someone doesn't have their own documentation, if someone is living where they're working, if someone expresses that they have to pay off a large debt, if someone is not in control of his or her own money, if someone has maybe lots of injuries or something like that that they don't have a good explanation for, someone that's being promised to do one thing and then they have to do something else.
Are these, and we say women, predominantly women that we've seen in these cases who are the victims here, are they threatened if they try to leave? Because sometimes we'll have viewers say to us, out of concern as well, why can't they walk away, get as far away from that as possible? But that's not always easy to do.
No, it's not always easy to do.
Talk about that.
Yeah, well, there's the traffickers. They're manipulative, right? And they're evil people. Yeah. So they threaten their victims. You know, you'll get arrested, you'll get deported. They threaten their well-being. They can threaten the well-being of their families. And in certain cultures, if you were known to have engaged in this type of sexual activity, there would be so much shame you couldn't go back home. So there's a lot of different reasons why, and it's so easy for us to sit here and go, well, why couldn't they just leave? Because, you know, we talk about trafficking being a form of modern-day slavery or a modern-day form of slavery, and a lot of times when we think about slavery, we think about chains, and in many images that you see in the media, you see chains and ropes, and most victims, that's not their experience, right? They're free. They walk among us. You know, they sit next to us sometimes and we don't even know it. But the chains are mental. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of different reasons. They feel helpless. If you don't speak the language, how are you going to reach out for help? You know, if the country where you come from, if your own law enforcement there is corrupt, how are you going to trust law enforcement when you're here?
We also have been told by law enforcement one of the big problems is women then scared to come forward and testify about what they're dealing with. It's a problem they deal with, trying to help, but the help means that they have to come forward and talk about the experience, which can be difficult to do. How do you all help with that?
Well,
how do you intercede and act as a mediator, helping and working with law enforcement?
Well, you have to, it's a lot of trust and rapport, because again, the fear and the brainwashing that goes on in that trafficking experience and that victimization is very, very powerful. So it is helping the victims to understand that, you know, we're here to help them, that there are remedies for trafficking victims in this country. If you come here from another country and you are a victim of trafficking, there are legal remedies in place for you. Doesn't mean you're automatically going to get deported, and that's what the traffickers would love them to believe, because that keeps them from saying anything.
How many victims are you able to help each year through the Human Trafficking Coalition, helping them find services, find help?
Right. Well, at the coalition, our main focus is education and awareness. Yeah. So we don't really provide direct services, and we help to support,
but you support those who do.
Absolutely.
One of the things one of the sheriffs talked about very vehemently, as a matter of fact, said this doesn't happen. If there aren't the perpetrators. Talk about that profile, and then conclude with the final message about what we need to do as a community and a society. You've talked about it eloquently, but kind of bring us full circle. But talk about that perpetrator aspect, which in this case or cases allegedly includes a high-profile sports billionaire, all the way to people who were interspersed throughout all different strata of our society.
You know, I say, look, anybody can be a trafficker, anybody can be a victim, and anybody can be a perpetrator, right? And someone asked me, did it shock me about Mr. Kraft that he was, you know, one of the perpetrators in this case? Alleged, excuse me, I'm sorry, alleged perpetrators. And I said, no, you know, he's human, right? And that's not to give him or anybody else an out, but there is no one profile, if that makes any sense. It doesn't really surprise me. It could be anybody. So your final takeaway, that if there's one thing you want people to recall, all of our viewers, about the scope of the problem, how they can get it and help bring it to an end. Leave them with one final thought. Learn what to look for, and if you see something, make something. If you see something, say something. The National Human Trafficking Hotline number is 888-373-7888. You can also text to Be Free 233-733. And for those of you at home scrambling for a pencil or pen, we've been running those numbers regularly on our broadcast and on the web, and we'll continue to do so. Tanya Meade, thank you for helping give us an education on this vital topic, something all of us continue to focus on and need to focus on, and we appreciate your help with that today. Thank you. It was my pleasure. Coming up next, why are some influential Florida Republicans criticizing President Trump? Our roundtable takes up that and more.